Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us over your lunch hour today for another one of our WESC webinars. My name is Ali Ramsey. I am the WESC Communications Coordinator, and we're really happy to have you here today. Our topic today is Pivot to Whole Health, the Key to Entrepreneurial Burnout, and it's presented by Allison Leah of the Saskatchewan Blue Cross. If you have any questions for her as we go through, feel free to submit them in the Q&A box. You can also introduce yourself, tell us a little about your business, who you are, in the chat box as well, and we'll be monitoring those questions as we go along. And as always, this webinar will be recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. You'll receive an email with the recording as well as a few handouts from Allison about 24 hours after this is done. And with that, I'll pass it over to Allison to begin the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ali. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Bear with me for a second here. Okay. Ali, you can see me all okay and the screen's good to go?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, hello and welcome everybody. Happy Mental Health Week. I think the timing of this webinar is quite fitting. It is an absolute pleasure to meet you as introductions go these days, and I'm really grateful that I get to spend the next hour with you. As Ali mentioned, I am here on behalf of Saskatchewan Blue Cross. For those of you who don't know of us, we are a local nonprofit health and benefits provider. So before we get started, I wanted to take a moment and set some intentions for us today. My goal is really to encourage transparency around burnout, eliminate a lot of the shame and guilt some of us feel because of it, and share some of my experiences, insight, and research as well with you to break down a lot of those barriers and stigma around burnout as an entrepreneur, and specifically a female entrepreneur as well. I also wanted to take this opportunity to let you know that you should consider this time we spend together today as your good deed to you. You're taking the time to learn, explore, and maybe reflect on how you're feeling, which is half the battle anyway. And if you need time to stretch, this is your reminder to take a glass of water and drink water. If you need a couple deep breaths, or you need to put your head down for a little quick lunch hour nap, I encourage you to do so. This webinar really is about burnout, right? So if that's what feels right in the moment, please feel free to do so. So we are going to dive in a little bit to the, understanding what burnout really is, what the definition is, some of my personal experiences as a female founder, and, some tips to really understand how to support yourself and your team as well, recognize the signs, and adopt a whole health approach, which I'll get into a little bit later. Another thing I wanted to do is to share that this is a safe space. I'm hoping to share some of my vulnerable moments with you and encourage discussion around burnout. I know many of you are currently experiencing or have experienced in the past, and I really don't feel like we need to feel shame or guilt about, being mentally and physically exhausted, right? Maybe you don't have the same drive as you once did, which is totally fine. And you can feel as if you're in a bit of a silo almost, while you're experiencing some of these feelings. So I want to encourage you to provide your thoughts. As Ali mentioned, please feel free to share some of your tips if you have any in the chat function. There might be someone attending today that really resonates with the information that you provide, or some of your experiences as they move forward. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I ventured into entrepreneurship at the ripe age of 17. I grew up in a family that really defined success as the value that you provide to other people. And that really followed me into my career in tech. And so during my studies at the University of Manitoba, I was the first female to build and lead a post-secondary entrepreneurship organization called CEO Manitoba. And our mission was essentially to disseminate information and create opportunities for multidisciplinary faculties across post-secondary entrepreneurship organizations, or post-secondary education associations across the province. And that was really a springboard for my career, as I ended up managing programs and marketing at Northforge Technology Exchange, which is essentially the tech incubator in Manitoba. We focused on, essentially supporting businesses from launch to scale. We built North America's largest fabrication lab, And then I actually ended up moving to Morden, Manitoba. It's in southern Manitoba. There's about 10,000 people that live there. And I built my own technology incubator focused on advanced manufacturing, ag technology, and just general SaaS software. There were a few businesses that were starting, retail shops. And so really the goal there was to provide some sort of support, mentorship, and education resources for those living in rural communities in Manitoba, which I think is really important. Accessibility is really important. And after accomplishing what I set out to do there, I actually moved to Saskatchewan. I'm based out of Saskatoon. And I led operations at Collabs, which many of you might be familiar with. And, while in my entrepreneurial support roles, I also launched successfully and also unsuccessfully a few service-based startups. And until about 2 years ago, I was running a consulting company on the side, supporting equity and public fundraising for multiple startups and nonprofit organizations across the prairies. So I absolutely loved what I was doing. My career meant so much to me. And when I started, I was so naive. And I honestly thought that pushing myself to the brink of exhaustion was something to be proud of. And the pressure to manage investors and funders' expectations, taking phone calls with startups at midnight on a Saturday because there's 10 days of runway left and what do we do now? Managing the construction of buildings, payroll, budgeting, hiring and managing staff, all things that you do every day likely were things that were very new to me and put a lot of weight on my shoulders, as you can imagine. And I'm not the one to say no ever. I'm definitely a yes woman, and I honestly thought that I had to take on a lot of these things, no matter what the cost, because I was so driven by passion and purpose. And no matter what, I had to do whatever I possibly could. And that sort of led to my breaking point. So a few years ago, I ended up actually collapsing and needing to go to the hospital. I was probably 72 hours, 3 days without any sleep. I maybe had a glass of water in that time. I probably consumed 3 times the amount of caffeine that the average person should consume in a week. That iced coffee diet didn't do me very well. And I had likely been, suffering with burnout for a long time. I hadn't taken a day off. I was, working at all costs. And I essentially hit rock bottom, right? That's pretty much as low as you can go. And it was unfortunate that it took that long and that much to recognize that I needed to do something, or I needed to focus on myself and make a change. And it really took, it took months, if not years of therapy and trying, trial and error and trying all these different things, reaching out to my community to really find a balance in what works best for me. Now, keep in mind, this is a very extreme, example of burnout, and it shows up for everyone in different ways. But I wanted to share a little bit about what burnout actually is, how it can show up just in your actions, in your attitude, whether it's physical or just mental. Most would say that I likely had burnout syndrome based on the fact that I essentially collapsed and I did need medical attention. But this is also one of the reasons why I pivoted my career, and it's also one of the reasons why I'm so proud to work for an organization like Saskatchewan Blue Cross, who embodies and promotes a whole health approach, which I'll talk about in a little bit, externally, but also internally as well. And it's so important, whether you're just starting out with your business or you've been running it for 20 years, that you take the time and the energy to protect yourself and your team members, because it's very, very easy to forget what's important. And that really is you and your well-being. So let's look into understanding burnout. So what does burnout mean in the first place? There are so many definitions, but I'd like to sort of look at this from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So while each profession has its own particular challenges, when it comes to entrepreneurs, the reality is that we're often the most passionate and driven people, but we can also be the most obsessive and out of balance as well. And the reality is that entrepreneurship really is an intense endeavor, and it's hard to separate yourself from the business. I've always sort of led with the idea that my personal success and value was determined and based off of my professional success, right? And so sooner rather than later, the roller coaster, all the things you go through, the setbacks, when they start to happen, most people start to take that, as a personal setback. And, because when you become so invested in your business that can lead to things like depression potentially, or burnout. Now, normal stress can be healthy, and it can even contribute to your peak performance realistically. But when we constantly don't recuperate by resting, we start to build chronic stress. Eventually the continuous stress on the body over a long period of time can disturb so many different, systems and functions in your body, right? The endocrine system, your nervous system, your cardiovascular system, your reproductive system. And it can essentially take over your body, right? And create some long lasting and really damaging effects that take a long time to recover from, if you don't take care of yourself. So unlike a cold or flu, burnout doesn't generally hit all at once, right? It sort of comes in phases, and, the warnings don't always exemplify themselves in the same way each time that you become burnt out. So it's really important to often gauge how you're feeling, check in often, sort of see how you're feeling, and determine whether action is really required. So I wanted to I'm very data driven, so I'd like to share this 12-stage model of burnout developed by psychologists in I believe it was 1974. So this idea that that burnout can manifest itself not just in physical ways, but things, different actions and attitudes. So compulsion to prove oneself, right? Excessive drive and ambition. We're so passionate about what we do. We're driven by it. And, because of that fact, sometimes we do whatever we can, no matter the cost, like I mentioned before, to be successful. Pushing yourself to work harder, or even, too hard is actually a thing. Neglecting your own needs, you begin to sacrifice things like sleep, exercise, eating well, displacement of conflict. So this looks like, instead of acknowledging that you're pushing yourself, right, you start to blame your boss, maybe your suppliers, everyone else. Oh, they put so much work on me. There's so much to do. And then no time for non-work related needs, right? So you begin to withdraw from, family and friends. You stop caring about the same things that you used to. The next one is denial. So impatience, with those around you. Instead of taking responsibility for your behaviors, you start to blame others. Withdrawal can look like withdrawing from your family and friends, social invitations to parties, to girls' nights, to movies, dinner dates. They start to feel burdensome instead of enjoyable. There's behavioral changes involved. Those on the road to burnout might become a little bit more aggressive, or maybe you start snapping at your partner or your kids a little bit more. Your tempers, you may be getting out of control. You've got so much on your plate. It's so much to handle, and no one understands. Feeling detached from your life and your ability to control your life. Depersonalization is very common. Inner emptiness and anxiety. Maybe this looks like, you start drinking a little bit more, or you're finding things to sort of fill that void where you once didn't have balance. Depression is obviously a potential. You start to feel a little bit hopeless, like things just aren't going to get better. You're not going to be able to get yourself out of this. And then burnout syndrome, right? Mental or physical collapse. So this can really impact your ability to cope. You're in fight or flight mode pretty much all the time, and your body really can't handle that. So let's look at the big picture, right? Why are we learning this? Why is it important? How does it affect me? So before we sort of get into this topic, I'd like for Allie to maybe pull up some polls. I'd like to sort of gauge, how many of us here today are sole proprietors, maybe small business owners, maybe you're an employee. And for those of you that are entrepreneurs, I'd love to know, how long have you been in business? And then the big money question, do you struggle with burnout as well? This will really sort of help me guide what we talk about for the remainder of the presentation, and hopefully bring some insights that you're not alone as well. Okay, perfect. 100% sole proprietor, excellent. Thanks for sharing that. And then the next poll, how long have you been an entrepreneur? Okay, excellent. Well, this is great information. Over 10 years, oh my goodness. Got some experts. Okay, and the big question, do you struggle with burnout? Or have you in the past? Do you currently now? Okay, excellent. Perfect. So about 50% of you said yes, 17% said no, and 33% said sometimes. And I think it's important to acknowledge too that, now number one, I'm not glad that, to know that most of you have experienced burnout or sometimes experience it, but I am glad that you had, the courage to share it, right? Sometimes we can struggle to admit that we're burnt out, when it's blatantly obvious. And why is that, right? Why do we feel shame and guilt for the way that we feel? And this is a prime example of why it's crucial for the term burnout to be used regularly and openly, so we can sort of demystify and recognize it as a health concern. And to anyone that's struggling with it, it doesn't matter who you are, regardless of who you are and what you do, it can happen to anyone. So thank you for those of you that shared. I wanted to share a little bit of information about a study that was actually conducted by Harvard Business Review. And it was on the link between passion and burnout. And they found, unsurprisingly, kind of results fared better for entrepreneurs who adopted somewhat of a harmonious passion for their work, right? During their work, they expressed very high levels of concentration, of attention, of absorption, and they assumed flexibility and found work-life balance without feeling guilty. Not sure what that feels like, but it sounds great. In contrast, those who were obsessively passionate were more driven by pressures and outcomes, right? They're concerned with social acceptance, status, ego, financial gain, and potentially often felt frustrated and broken down by their work. And at the same time, they claimed that they couldn't live without it. And ironically, despite their qualifications, they reported a lack of focus, difficulty in balancing other roles and responsibilities as well. So I think the main theme here is that you're no good to anyone unless you're good to yourself. Your physical, emotional, financial, and mental well-being, right, your whole health, will be affected if you don't adopt some form of response to signs of burnout or work on them proactively. I sometimes relate our desire and our need to save our planet and contribute to a more sustainable way of living is essentially how most of us should treat ourselves, right? You should care about how you treat, nourish, care for yourself. And if you don't take action against burnout, this is a very cheesy line, your future is likely less green and can take years to replenish. And so what does this mean for me and my business? And how can investing or not investing, in support for yourself and for your staff really make a qualitative and a quantitative impact? So I gathered some statistics by the Canadian Centre of Occupational Health and Safety to sort of outline how a productive you and a productive workplace can make an impact, both in a negative and a positive way. So many studies have shown that investments in health and health education lead to a stream of higher potential and therefore higher income. And this is especially preached by occupational health and safety. And some of you that have maybe potentially worked in an HR capacity or you've been in business for many years will know the benefits of investing in this kind of a sort of a whole health approach. How you can see qualitative and quantitative factors relating to having a mental health and or a overall health focus at work. So, improved creativity, employee cooperation, retention, engagement, productivity. It's easier to recruit and retain employees when this type of focus is adopted. You would imagine that even just doing some of the small things and some of the small tips that I'll go over later in the presentation can really make a big impact. And most that saw this type of, or who didn't incorporate this type of an approach in their workplace can sometimes see, absenteeism, employee turnover, health costs are rising, your group insurance premiums are going, very high because they're claiming lots, workplace injuries and accidents, and then presenteeism as well. And I wanted to sort of stop on the presenteeism note and sort of explain, obviously this means, or for those of you who don't know what it means, this is the lost productivity that occurs when employees are not fully functioning in the workplace. So you're at your desk, right? You start, you work from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, and by 11 o'clock you've done, you haven't really done a lot. You've been sitting at your desk, maybe, using one of those Facebook quizzes to find out what kind of a cheese you are. You're so burnt out, you've got so much on your plate that you're almost in this analysis paralysis, and it's hard to really get anything done. Or those emails that take 45 minutes to write when really they should have only taken 5. And so, having employees at work who are showing up every day, but really not having the energy to engage, to go above and beyond, to be productive, to contribute, wholeheartedly to the role can really take an effect on a business. And this must be understood and taken into account in businesses that are just starting out, or businesses that have operated, or have 500 plus employees, or have operated for 50 years, right? Regardless of the industry that you work in, these factors can make a huge impact. And so to highlight some of that impact, Saskatchewan Blue Cross recently partnered with a company called Mindbeacon. Now, this is a cognitive behavioral therapy platform that has some really great facts and potentially unsurprising but interesting information on their website around how much burnout and mental health challenges can affect an individual, a company, a province, a country. And so looking at some of their statistics, I was actually fairly shocked. The slide that I have up right now sort of illustrates what kind of an impact on a quantitative side, the amount of revenue or potential lost because of things like presenteeism and absenteeism. Those who have shared that they struggle with mental health and who don't seek support for it. And out of 10,000 employees, that's 2,000 that have claimed to struggle with their mental health. If you have a team of 10, that's 2 people on your team that likely struggle with mental health. And sometimes, no one wants to come forward, or they don't openly share it. And sometimes it's difficult to seek treatment for these types of things because of cost, or not knowing where to go. And so this is why tools like Mindbeacon, which I'll talk about in a little bit, are so important to protecting your mental health. Now, looking at this and thinking of your own situation, you might think, okay, so maybe I have something in place, but it's not quite working. What can I do to start or to change? Or maybe you don't have anything incorporated in your business right now. Maybe it's just yourself and you're working alone. How can I make sure that I'm protecting myself or setting a great foundation for when your business scales or you hire more employees? Now, obviously, starting is a great step in itself. There are a lot of challenges when it comes to knowing what kind of support to provide. Keeping costs low, training employees, or potentially employees not engaging or taking interest with these elaborate wellness programs that you can sometimes see out there. There are a lot of great programs that have adapted to these types of issues and have become a little bit more realistic and accessible. But often we share these resources available during maybe the onboarding process, or maybe even not at all. And then the discussion around mental health sort of gets buried, right? There's so many more important things going on. And, maybe, to reflect, I'd be interested to know how often that you have conversations around mental health. Maybe, if you're running your own business with your family or your friends or your colleagues or with your employees. Maybe you did last month, maybe you never really have, maybe you don't feel like you have that relationship with your employees. But sometimes simply just asking and taking little steps and initiatives can really make a huge difference. One of the things that Saskatchewan Blue Cross has enabled, they provide mental health days, encouraging, engagement and wellness activities through our social boards, our Yammer boards. We've hosted, a yoga or a breathing or mindfulness, our workshop over the lunch hour for staff to attend. Little things like this can really build confidence in your team and feel like you're valued and really make an effort to show it. And I think that's one of the things that you're also doing today too, right? You've taken time out of your day to learn, to pay attention to the topic, to, support, to build, sort of breaking down some of those barriers and being really honest with yourself about how you feel. Maybe there's some tips and things that you can do to help support yourself and your team, and you're making an effort. So that's half the battle too, right? So one thing I've recognized is that burnout can also be contagious. And if the culture of your workplace is unsupportive of balance and boundaries, right, it can lead to challenges with attraction, retention. Resources like Mindbeacon, for example, can be extremely valuable for HR teams or just founders for themselves to support regular awareness for yourself and your team members around burnout. And I'm not just saying this because they're a partner of Saskatchewan Blue Cross. I use these tools weekly. I rely on them for many things, and maybe I feel like I'm going into a bit of a pattern, and I need a little bit of a pick me up or something to just say, take a deep breath, or maybe I can't get in to see my counselor because it's a really busy time. These are great resources that you can pull up on your browser or on your mobile phone and sort of read into some steps and tips that you can take to feel better. Okay, so pivot to whole health. So what is whole health? I'm going to do my best to explain how whole health is viewed at Saskatchewan Blue Cross and in my eyes as well. Really, this is an approach to support your physical, emotional, mental, and emotional well-being. These are preventative, restorative skill sets that you can take with you as life can produce some unexpected situations, stress, illness, a global pandemic, you name it. But there are a lot of pieces to the puzzle when it comes to enabling this kind of an approach, and it can be fairly daunting to know what resources there are to access or how to approach this concept and break things down. So I thought I'd provide some examples. So let's start maybe with mental. Practicing mindfulness, for example. It costs practically nothing. There are a ton of YouTube resources that you can follow, but it's really important to focus on what's present and what's important to you as well. Checking in with yourself and making sure that you're aware of your surroundings and how you're approaching different things and whether you're in line with a lot of your goals. Because the power of the mind is unreal, right? The mind body approaches you can take, the breathing exercises, it can really help slow your heart rate and help you concentrate. Maybe meditation, I found that's been a great practice to get into, but actually fairly difficult because you sit down and you try and not think about anything for a few minutes at a time, which for someone like me is very difficult. Maybe personal development, investing in your education and things that make you better, right? Moving towards what matters most to you and affects your well-being. Maybe you carve out some times to take, a LinkedIn, education course, maybe something that's even, an hour long over your lunch hour can really contribute. Physical and emotional, your surroundings are incredibly important. Having comfortable, healthy spaces where you work and live really impacts your physical and your emotional health as well. I will be sharing a little bit more on this later. We have a wellness guide coming up that Saskatchewan Blue Cross has developed to sort of talk about ergonomics and how that's potentially been challenging working from home with COVID and things like that and how to manage that. So I'll get to that a little bit later. Physical, food, and drink, right? The right fuel to not only help you live, but live well. That's really important as well. And another feature of the wellness guide that I'll be able to share later. Recharging, getting enough rest, relaxation, and sleep. Maybe this is dedicating one day to getting sleep a week, right? Maybe you don't book any meetings until 9:30, so you can sleep until 8:30, something like that. Moving the body. Moving the body could really help prevent and treat, many illnesses, and it also feels really good. Getting out for a little bit of a walk or having a little exercise break, even taking 10 or 15 minutes to just stretch and feel good, or getting outside can really make a huge difference. Friends, family, coworkers, having close and loving and supportive relationships can really improve your mental health and well-being. There's a reason why WESC exists. It's to provide a community of people who are just like you and get you, right? They're going through and growing through a lot of the changes and experiences and challenges that you are. And it is so important to leverage those types of connections as you move forward. And for those of you who have been in business for many years and you have a lot of advice and lessons learned, it's so important that you share that with those of us who are, maybe starting out or we're not really sure where to go next. That can be really, really beneficial and really contribute to, a positive mental health and a positive experience as an entrepreneur as well. And then, of course, finally, protecting your finances, investing in tools and protection, essentially, for you to feel secure and prepared for anything life throws at you, right? The pandemic taught us a lot about this, and sometimes it's difficult, but it's top of mind when things like this happen. And I'll touch on this a little bit later in the presentation, but making an effort to find balance in all of these areas is difficult. And so, in my approach, finding balance in all of them has been obviously an effort for me and has made me a lot more confident. So I'm a list person. I'm very type A, if you couldn't already tell that. And I've actually struggled to find another entrepreneur that isn't type A. So I'm sure a lot of you will resonate with this. But sometimes I like to make a list, and I like to write down some of the wins and successes that I have in each of these categories. And usually it'll provide me with a little bit of positive reinforcement, or it'll make me feel really good that I'm in control in most of these areas. Or sometimes it'll sort of point out, well, maybe you need to sort of pull it together, give myself a bit of a kick in the butt to really carve out more time to focus on some of these areas, because it is a balance and it can be a slippery slope. So taking care of you. As a female entrepreneur, we have this idea of what balance looks like. And when I hear work-life balance, it really generally means work-life integration that takes charge. And purpose versus balance, like I mentioned, is a very slippery slope. And I know this has been something that I've always really struggled with. I became so passionate that I sort of forget about the other important cause, right? Which is myself. And the same dedication that we give to our businesses should be reciprocated essentially back to us. And for the most part, we have a pretty good idea of how to take care of ourselves, right? We run successful businesses. We're here, we're working towards our goals, we're moving along, we're getting by. But it isn't just getting by that's what life is about, right? And sometimes doing things like we've always done it isn't the best approach, or isn't really the best way to go about this. Developing an approach and an understanding and a toolkit for your self-care is essential as a business owner, and to make sure that you put your best foot forward and continue to build value. So rather than say, make sure you focus on your self-care, everyone, it's very easy to say that. So let's maybe look into some tangible action items that you can use and incorporate on a day-to-day basis to feel more confident. And when you look at self-care, on Instagram, they say, oh, it's a piece of chocolate cake in a bubble bath. Although there has to be some form of scientific evidence that helps, because I personally attest to feeling excellent after most of those things. But let's look at some really tangible tools that you can use yourself, or that you can provide to your team as well, to sort of support and prevent burnout. Oh, go back here. Okay, so recognizing the signs. Burnout in its core form is essentially a mismatch between the demands of your job and the available resources, especially if you're a one person show. The current workplace mantra of we have to do more with less is not always sustainable. And so it's important to recognize and not ignore the signs, dismissing some of those feelings because you feel they aren't valid, or you're ashamed, or you feel guilty, or there's no one else to do it, so it has to be me. So, you can't put any work on more people. The longer you go without recognizing, or even worse, ignoring some of these signs that I maybe mentioned earlier that you've experienced, the further down the rabbit hole that you go, and the longer that it will take for you to essentially recuperate. It took me, years to really build the discipline to listen to my body, to take time to reflect, and it is still a challenge. I still struggle with this, and it's likely going to be a lifelong struggle for me, which is why I'm so glad that I've taken the time to really learn and educate myself on a lot of these things that I can do to support myself. And one of the specific pieces of advice that I've received has been that identifying stress triggers as well can really sort of help you either avoid them or prepare yourself for them as you go along. Maybe it's doing payroll, or just opening up your financial projections, or doing reporting for your public funding, or dealing with with vendors. If that stuff really gives you a lot of anxiety, or you don't feel great while doing it, or if it's hard to work up the courage to go and do some of those activities, just taking note that that's something that you struggle with is a great first step. And it's very, it'll be a lot easier for you to come up with solutions to support yourself get through those times if you actually know what your stress triggers look like, and how to support them. So tips to avoid entrepreneurial burnout. That's why we're here. And I live by a lot of these. I have to remind myself to incorporate them into my daily activities a lot of the time. But these are some of the things that have really helped myself and a lot of the other business owners that I know as well. So number one, assess where you are each week and following through with your chosen strategies. This is a temperature check to its core. If you have a deadline on Friday and you're feeling like that's unreasonable, this can't always be done, but see if you can give yourself a little bit more time, or before you actually set the deadline, you maybe think about, okay, well, I've got a lot of stuff on my plate right now. I want to give myself a little bit of a buffer. Maybe you rethink some of your commitments and you sort of can, move around your schedule, reschedule a couple of things and just give yourself that buffer, because that can really avoid setting yourself up for failure. And then you feel worse, right? Tweaking your list of things to do as needed. So like the first point, making your schedule fit you if you can. Pick all the things that are absolutely necessary and all the things that you can put on that nice to have list or that little shelf that can wait. And as I mentioned before, setting yourself up for failure will really only make you feel worse. So you need to be honest with yourself about how you're feeling and what your capabilities look like for that week or that month or that day even. Making yourself less available by setting strict boundaries for yourself and even your colleagues will really almost demand or create more trust and respect. And I ultimately think this will help you become more productive during the time that you actually are working to get things done, because you have a set amount of time. You're dedicating, 6 o'clock, to the time you go to bed for you. You're going to have to do everything you can to give to your business, within that time frame. I've always been a yes woman, and I've offered up my precious time when I really didn't have any to give. And that led to a lot of the reasons why I ended up with burnout syndrome. The 3 Ds, I love this: do it, dump it, and delegate it. So think of your kitchen and your living room and your bedroom, maybe your kids' rooms. Are there dishes not done? Some unfolded laundry. If you say no, you're probably not telling the truth, because it's so hard to keep up with all these things, right? Having these lingering decisions and tasks to do can make anyone feel extremely overwhelmed. And even figuring out where to go for dinner, can be difficult sometimes. So my rule is, if there is a task or something unfinished, I either just do it right away, get up an extra 5 minutes early to just put the dishes in the dishwasher so you don't have to worry about it later. If it's a large project or something that's really daunting or causing you a lot of anxiety that maybe can be pushed off, dump it. Just leave it, put it in that box on that shelf for you to pick up in a day where you feel like you have the capacity to do so. And then if you can, potentially delegate it. Is this something that potentially someone else could do better than me? Or could someone do this in 10 minutes where it would take me an hour? Those are really, I think, great ways to assess different tasks and things that you have going on, so that those little lingering decisions really don't, bog you down throughout the day and you're not thinking about them when you're supposed to be focusing on other important things. Connect with people who care about you. I think that all of the different, entrepreneurial support networks, WESC, the incubators, anybody who is really sort of in your corner, who understands what you're going through. Sometimes maybe your partner may not have ever been an entrepreneur or knows what the day-to-day things that you're working on or the stress that it causes you. It can be really difficult to try and explain or have them empathize or understand the volume of the pain or the anxiety that you feel. And so sometimes, spending time around like-minded individuals or those who have experienced many of the things that you have, or maybe there's a female mentor or a mentor that you can find that can really sort of connect with you on your level and explain how to rationalize and get through some of those things. That can really put some of your challenges into perspective and make you feel a little bit confident that it does get better. It is going to get easier. We are going to be able to get through this, and that you have all the power and the tools to do so. Ask, as an entrepreneur and a female entrepreneur at that, we are independent, we are ambitious, we are capable, we are smart. And sometimes it can feel a little bit awkward and maybe uncomfortable to ask for help. If you're good at doing this, I am sending you a huge thumbs up, because I've always found this very challenging. One of the reasons I absolutely love organizations like WESC is, we're all like-minded, we're all risking a lot to build something great, and all the communities and events and opportunities to connect with other people just like you is an absolute gift. So if you don't already leverage these resources and people around you, please do so, because it can be, a very lonely road, and you would be very surprised at how much insight you can gain from just sending a text to somebody or acknowledging someone on a webinar and saying, hey, I've heard about your business. Could we maybe chat for 10 or 15 minutes? You never know what kind of golden nuggets you can get out of opportunities like that. So you should always ask for help. And then the last one here is learn. So learning to verbalize your feelings is difficult, and especially because it's such a sensitive topic sometimes. Now, this point can be used, in terms of educating yourself, which we'll talk about it in the next minute or two here, but also, bringing the people, bringing in the people around you and making them aware that this is something that you struggle with can really help you. Sharing some of the signs that you recognize when you're getting really tired, or maybe you haven't really reached burnout yet, but you're getting really exhausted and stressed out. Being able to also ask your support system for help and to keep an eye out on you when they sort of start recognizing some of these signs. The other key part here is finding out how you feel supported and being able to tell that person how they can support you, because it can be really daunting to know how to support an entrepreneur, right? Do you need to not talk about it? Do you need to talk about it? Do you just need to sleep it off? Everybody operates differently. So finding out what really works for you and communicating that to your partners or your friends or your family can really help you keep that line of communication open, keep yourself a little bit more transparent on how you're feeling. And I think for the most part, you'll tend to feel better when you don't feel like you're in it alone. Education is really important, talking to your doctor or counselor potentially about how you're feeling, and asking for guidance, finding a podcast and book. I will talk about this a little bit later. I have some goodies to share. Participate in events or discussions around stress and burnout, which is essentially what you're doing right now. So kudos to you. And then there's tools like Mind Beacon, as I mentioned, Headspace, there's Calm, there's all these different resources that you can have, at your fingertips, right? With your mobile phone. There's so many great ways to access a lot of these resources, and most of them are fairly cost efficient. The next one here is on investing and protecting. So one of the things I know a lot of people don't really pay attention to is, I gotta go back here. Sorry. One of the things a lot of people don't pay attention to is some of the benefits they might have available to them. Maybe your individual or group benefits, maybe you don't have them. There are several ways to leverage these kinds of tools to cover things like naturopaths, dietitians, massage, chiro, psychologists, counselors, things like that. And so it's important to take the time to educate yourself on your current plan or the intricacies of some of the different individual and group plans available. If you feel your coverage is maybe not enough, there's top-ups that are available, and personal health plans, things like that are a deductible benefit, right? Self-employed individuals can claim a personal health plan for themselves and their immediate family members on their personal tax return. I believe the limit is $1,500. You should ask your accountant about that for each self-employed person and member of their household that are over the age of 18. And then many group plans, of course, offer short and long-term disability options, which is something no one really values until they need it. And taking time away from work is sometimes necessary, and having the safety net and protection there for you is really great, and it's really important. And these plans don't need to be extravagant, but these gestures really do show yourself and your employees that you care and that you're approaching their whole health with caution and care. But realistically, you got to find what works for you. It's going to take trial and error. For those of you who struggle with burnout often, it's going to take, obviously, as you likely know, a while to find out what your groove is, or recognizing the signs and how it really shows up. For those of you who don't often struggle with burnout, or you really haven't in the past, now's the best time, obviously, to educate yourself on what this looks like. Maybe you didn't think you struggled with burnout, but you actually do, right? But be patient with yourself, delegate what you can, and leverage your community, which is also really important. And lastly, don't bite off more than you can chew. You do not need to boil the ocean in a day. And you also shouldn't be expecting to see results in 24 hours, right? Approaching this pivot to whole health can, or may be unrealistic, or feel unrealistic to some people. And to stick to them every day may not seem feasible, or it might seem impossible, but really the best thing that you can do is to leave your expectations at the door, and don't make avoiding burnout another looming task on your Monday morning checklist of things to do, right? It should be taken as an act of kindness to yourself, not another obligation. And you work hard because you're passionate and you care, right? You should be providing that same sort of care to yourself. So take the time to really assess what's going to work best for you. What can you do today? And maybe build off that, working on building habits. Atomic Habits is a great book if you'd like to maybe check that one out if you haven't read it already, on building some of these sort of self-care habits that can really support you. And also doing things like, for example, on the slide here, I have, asking for small things. Maybe you ask for some help with laundry or dinner this week. It's something very small, but gives you an extra 20 or 30 minutes back of your time. Do one thing for yourself every day. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe if it's taking a 10-minute walk, maybe if it's getting a Starbucks, whatever that looks like for you. Prioritizing sleep once a week, which is something I mentioned earlier, might be helpful. Maybe Saturdays or Sundays are your day, or Tuesdays. And also having strict cutoff times, right? Making sure that you're being cognizant and respectful of your time and not just other people's time. And then there's protecting your team. So I'll go over this quickly because I know we don't have much time left, but these are some tools and strategies for, any business owner or manager. Providing tools and access to resources, training, and positive reinforcement can really, generate a lot of respect from your employees and colleagues. And it's a great way to spend your time to really embody a whole health approach. So providing those clear expectations, making sure that your employees or just yourself, that you're creating opportunities for you to assess the different resources that are available to you. And as well, helping yourself and your employees understand their value, right? People are willing to work, and feeling good about what they do will make them want to protect themselves so that they can give more back to your business. And the second one here is, encouraging social support and respect, talking about mental health and about burnout, promoting a very supportive culture, incorporating things I call TNTs, which are tiny noticeable things, like saying thank you more often, or providing fast feedback, right? Frequent, accurate, specific, and timely feedback. Being clear when giving assignments on deadline and roles, and minimizing sort of conflicting requests and ambiguity, which are two known accelerants of burnout as well. And making constructive feedback feel learning focused, right? It's a two-way conversation. I think, at the end of the day, just talking about this or having this as an open conversation can really do a lot. And burnout is impacting many industries at an alarming rate. So I think it really starts to take the pressure off of one individual person when it's spoken about to a large group. And I also think, it seems so simple, and it seems crazy that some people just don't take the time to do this, but just saying, hey, how are you, can make such an impact in someone's day and make them feel open that they can talk to you and open up about maybe what they're struggling with. So I also wanted to bring up a little bit about why invest in a personal health plan, just in general, right? Securing coverage for the future, protecting your loved ones, your health, your health changes, you want to safeguard your finances, and provide peace of mind. This is really important as you scale. And I think the idea that having coverage like this can also supplement things when maybe you're pre-revenue or you can't afford to bring someone on full time. Well, this is a great opportunity to spend a few dollars a month. Maybe you cover 50% or 25% or 10 or 75 of health benefit coverage for your employees, so that they feel supported and that they can take the time to invest in their health. So for example, a personal health plan is a great option for small businesses. We have 20 core health and 7 additional custom options. And we've also sort of looked into providing information on deductibility. Our personal health plans do not go up based on usage. Another reason why investing in these types of tools is that for many entrepreneurs starting out, or those who run very lean operations or can't afford to obviously pay for benefits or a large group plan, or maybe don't qualify, offering and arranging, like I mentioned, to set up and cover a portion of a plan can be a really great asset as well. We also have Blue Essentials. This is a great plan for companies who are between 3 and 19 employees. Maybe you're just starting out. There's a lot of really great flexible options and really competitive rates. It's very affordable, and you can essentially work with some of our specialists to tailor to the unique needs of your business. And then I wanted to also share some of our enhanced services. So we're really proud to announce our partnership with Lumica and MindBeacon. Both are leaders in their industry. Lumica provides a very seamless virtual healthcare experience. This is great for those working in small or maybe remote communities, or you don't want to leave the couch to go to the doctor's office and you want to keep your sweatpants on, which is something I do often. I can refill my prescription from my phone, which is really amazing. And MindBeacon as well provides digital and online mental health support. You can work through a program. There's one-on-one sessions with licensed counselors. There's also a lot of really great written blogs and things that you can utilize. And mental health, especially during COVID, has been a priority for us. And so we're also excited to announce that we have now opened up the opportunity, not just for you to have coverage for psychologists, but also for counselors and social workers as well. So moving forward here, we have a lot of custom group options for those of you who have larger businesses, over 20 employees. And one of the other partnerships that we've also developed for our group clients has been with Maple. So they're essentially almost a combination of Lumica and MindBeacon. They provide health and mental health resources as well. They have a lot of really excellent articles and little mini blogs on work tips and ideas for engaging with your colleagues and staff on mental health. So definitely check those out. But to summarize, investing in a whole health approach can really improve things like retention, attraction. It can promote a culture that focuses on healthy living, which is so crucial to everyone's success. And there are a lot of different tools and resources that are out there and experts to really lean on to find what works for you. So I'm really excited about this section. We have put together some of my favorite ways to engage on this topic. I also wanted to provide, alongside just the podcast recommendations, is a place to start, because sometimes I feel like someone provides me with a recommendation on a podcast and I don't know which episode to start in. Maybe I check one out and it doesn't really resonate with me, and then I just never end up listening again. So what I'll do is, in the chat, just as we're wrapping up here, I will copy and paste some of these specific episodes as well, so that you can take a look at this. I also encourage you, if you wanted to take a screenshot or a picture of this slide, so you can check some of these out. If you haven't listened to them already, feel free to do so. And then I also wanted to put together some literature as well. So I'm So Effing Tired by Amy Shaw. She is so funny and her content is so interesting. I really love that book. And as well, Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. So Emily and Amelia Nagoski, I believe their last name is, they're sisters and they're experts in this area, which I think is so cool. And they actually have an episode on the Brene Brown Unlocking Us podcast. So if you maybe want to listen to the podcast first and then check out the book after, they have a lot of really, really interesting information and statistics and things like that on burnout. And then I also wanted to share with you that after this webinar, we will be providing a burnout guide post-presentation that outlines a lot of the content that we discussed today, but some of those podcasts and books that I've also mentioned, some digital health tools, some information on Saskatchewan Blue Cross and how to contact me as well. And then also there will be a survey that Wes will be sent out to provide with you after the webinar. You can enter yourself into essentially a draw for a $50 gift card to any of the women-led businesses on the West website list. And you will also be signed up to receive you'll be the first to receive our wellness guide that features a few local partners in Saskatchewan and some great tips on things like home office ergonomics and diet, self-care. There's also this really cool wellness assessment that you can take, but a lot of really great content for you to look through that I hope is really valuable. And I wanted to finish up here, to sort of wrap up, if there are any questions that I'll get to them in a minute, but I wanted to summarize a few things before I leave you with one of my favorite quotes on the next slide. They say that if you love what you do, that you'll never work a day in your life. And I want to remind you that you are worth more than you do, and that your ambition is respected, and pushing yourself to the brink of exhaustion will not bring you fulfillment. It is embracing your friends, your family, your capabilities, celebrating your successes and your failures, and really being grateful that you get to wake up every day and build something of value. That is That is so incredible. And so be kind to yourself, be kind to your fellow entrepreneurs and those that support you chasing your ambitions. It takes a lot of courage to show up, to just show up, right? And to take risks and to give something your all, and to know when to slow down and to enjoy the ride too, right? I think that's really what it's all about. So I wanted to preface, there is a quote that I regularly read to myself. And when I was back in Winnipeg, I would regularly share this with any entrepreneurs, specifically female entrepreneurs that would come through our various programs. And I find it's actually best to take this in if you close your eyes and you listen to it and you visualize yourself while I read this. So feel free, if you want to be a little cheesy and do that, feel free to do that, or you can read along with me. But I wanted to leave this as a takeaway for today. So the woman in the arena. So it is not the critic who counts, not the woman who points out how strong women stumble, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the woman who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short and short again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends herself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if she fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that her place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. That's a quote by Theodore Roosevelt, and it's actually the man in the arena, but I wanted to make sure that I found a version of this that spoke to the audience here. But I wanted to leave that with you. I want to thank you for your time and for tuning in today. I hope that this provided you with a few little nuggets of things that you can take away and incorporate today, tomorrow, for the next weeks, months, and years to come. And I also encourage you to open up the conversation about burnout with those around you, with your family, with your kids, right? This is fairly new. It's a fairly new term. And I think it's really important that we educate ourselves and that we do everything that we can to keep ourselves in check, in balance, and really move towards a whole health approach. So thank you very much for your time. And I know that we don't have a ton of time here, maybe 2 minutes left, but if there are any questions, please feel free to turn your camera on and share, or I can follow up with you a little bit later. So maybe I'll pass it off to Ali now.
Thank you so much, Allison. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now, but like you mentioned, we'll be sending out that PDF so everybody has your contact info. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to Allison afterwards and she will be able to help you out. So we really appreciate your time. That was very interesting on how to better manage your stress and the burnout. Lots of great tools in there. I'm definitely going to listen to some of those podcasts.
Yes, for sure.
And thank you again for everyone who joined us today. As a reminder, you'll be able to view this webinar on demand on our website by the end of the day. And our next webinar is actually coming up next Wednesday, and it's Business Plan Basics with WESC's very own business advisors, Danielle Grimes and Amanda Parkinson. So if you want to check that one out and you haven't registered already, you can do so at wesc.ca/events. Thank you again, Allison, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Take care, everyone. Thanks.